Well, good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on the 16th of January, 2019. It is 3 minutes after 7 Eastern Time. Hope everybody had a terrific day. We've got, I don't know if you've heard, but we have two weather systems headed our way here into the east. And that is what we will be covering tonight, along with a few other things along the way. And, of course, making an entrance now, as he is known to do, our Joe Rayo. No, don't be sorry.
Door.
No, not at all. How are you tonight?
I'm fine. I saw the link come up on my screen, and I've actually put this on my Facebook page as well. So
awesome. So we welcome Joe Rayo's. You put it on your weather page?
Both of them.
Welcome Joe Rayo's friends, because he has many, and also those of you that are his friends on his weather page, Joe Rayo Weather on Facebook. And we'll take the time out here to welcome a couple of my people. We have those from SS Storm Chase and Forecast Team as they come in from South Central Pennsylvania and North Central Maryland. And just as a side note, because I know a few of you have mentioned this, we do long weather shows here. It's hard to imagine that we could actually fill an hour at times or even more on weather, but we do. And totally understand, and this applies to everyone, totally understand if you can only sit for a few minutes or maybe you come back to it later. That's all fine and dandy. No problem. If you prefer to read about some of the weather, I posted numerous articles and weather maps and forecast snow maps and so on from the Weather Service and my own, and you can find those on meteorologistjoecioffi.com if you prefer. Also, hi to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch page. Also, hi to meteorologist Jeff Banson's weather page. Also, hello to those of you watching from Angry Ben's Angry Weather, my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and those that are watching on my directly from my app on Google Play. I think I caught almost everybody.
I think we've got like half of the United States here.
Well, we'll see. But in the meantime, Joe, we've got these two storms. Joe's going to be with us, by the way, tonight, tomorrow night, and Friday night. So we're going to have a lot of us, 3 in a row. Busy night. There's not a whole lot of weather going on where we are, and actually through much of the eastern part of the United States, it's fairly quiet. It's busy in the west, and I'm going to bring up the warnings page. And these storms, of course, going to be impacting the eastern part of the United States. Let me just move the WPC rainfall map down. But the first storm is now got those winter weather advisories that we have up from Kansas through northern Missouri, central Illinois, central Indiana. And, of course, they had a big snow last week. This is a much weaker system. We've got preemptive winter storm watches up for western and north central New York.
Already?
I double-checked to make sure. Those are up for beginning Saturday morning. Now, they put it up, that's a little early to put them up. But for that area, it's pretty well a lock that they're going to see snow.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that they're fairly used to, may I use the term, significant snows. So it's kind of surprising to me that they put it up so early. But then again, it is, after all, a holiday weekend coming up, Joe, and a lot of people may be out on the roadways or going skiing or whatever. So they want to give people a leg up if they're taking a 3-day weekend. That there's going to be some problematic weather conditions by later Saturday.
The west, Joe, with the second system that's going to be impacting the eastern half of the United States, and particularly our area, over the weekend, that is now off the storm itself is off the west coast. I got an impressive satellite loop of it, but I'll show you in a second. But the winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, avalanche warnings in western Colorado. We have blizzard warnings up throughout much of eastern California, right along the Sierra Nevadas. And on the other side of that, you've got high wind and flood watches that are up. So this is a powerhouse that's coming in.
This is the one that once it gets, we usually say once it gets its feet wet, once it comes onshore, it will have a lot more in terms of observing stations to feed into the supercomputers to help the computers better track and better get an idea. Wow, that thing looks like a wintertime hurricane.
Yeah, I'm going to put it up on the screen right now.
Once
This is the visible satellite loop of
Yeah.
it. I mean, you have a wholesale comma head out there in the Pacific just spinning away, and look at that big arm of moisture just sweeping right into the entire state of California and then lifting up to the northeast.
That's quite a stem winder, if you will. And again, once it gets on shore and has access, the weather observation stations in the west will have access to taking its temperature as well as a whole bunch of other things, so to speak, and feed that information into the supercomputer. So I would think, Joe, by tomorrow, and especially on into Friday and Saturday, we'll have a much better idea as to exactly where this is going to go and how it may influence our area, although I think we already know that we are going to get some heavy precipitation here Saturday night and at least for the first part of Sunday. The big question for the tri-state New York area, out let's say within a 75-mile radius of Midtown Manhattan, is who's going to get what in terms of precipitation type. Will it be rain? Will it be sleet, freezing rain, ice, or will it be mostly snow, or maybe a combination of all three? That's still something that needs to be worked on over the next couple of days.
And we're gonna get into that more later when we start looking at the models. I got the this is the 72-hour snow total map as of I believe this is from 7 a.m. this morning. So far, is a general area from into the mountains, kind of parallel with Visalia, on northwestward through into northeastern California. Anywhere from 18 to 24 inches has fallen so far.
So far.
And I say so far because I actually I went to the Sacramento Weather Service, because apparently that's their jurisdiction, that particular area, and I found this. This is their. Yesterday it was Wednesday through early Friday. So actually, these numbers have been lowered because of the snow that's already fallen. But they're putting out a forecast for 60 to 80, 36 to 48, 24 to 30, Donner Pass 48 to 60. These are just great. Carson Pass 60 to 80 there. It's hard for me to read. The print is Sonoma Pass 60 to 80. Now, can you imagine being a forecaster? Their populations there are very thin, but can you imagine standing in a supermarket checkout line, if you ever can arrive there, and hearing somebody complaining about those horrible weather people don't know what they're talking about. They forecasted 100 inches and we only got 80.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing, and of course. Something like that sometimes occasionally happens to the lee of the Great Lakes here in New York State, in places like Barnes Corners and Watertown, New York, and Buffalo, New York, when the wind happens to be blowing just at the right angle. But what we're looking here, Joe, is probably an upslope pattern. I mean, when the moisture comes in, the storm comes in from the Pacific, the air is forced upslope of the mountains, and that's where I guess you get those tremendously high snow amounts.
Yeah, they also, in the blizzard warnings, they're talking about wind gusts well in excess of 100 miles an hour.
This
is really serious stuff here. So this storm is coming inland. Here's what it looks like on the surface map. You see it over on the far left. The low center itself is still pretty far offshore, just to show you the huge, the huge influence in terms of the amount of geography this system is covering. A piece of this is the piece that was ejected eastward, and that is the first weather system of the two that's coming into the eastern part of the U.S. for Thursday night and Friday. It's going to be moving across the Midwest and the plains of the Midwest tonight and on Thursday. This is the much weaker piece. It's going to put down a few inches and really not too much more. And then we wait, because it's pretty much a sizable piece of this second storm is going to be coming inland and going over the mountains and making its way toward us.
And what happens generally, Joe, when a big storm like this comes, into the western United States and then moves across the mountains, I like to say it's kind of like taking a jigsaw puzzle and dropping the puzzle on the floor, and all the pieces go every which way. And then once the storm continues to propagate or progress east of the mountains, those pieces start coming back together. They may not come back together the same way that when the puzzle was dropped as the system was going over the continental divide, but it is basically the same system that came inland from the ocean, and that eventually translates into trouble for us. The general rule I've often used is a big storm from the Pacific, once it hits the coast, it takes about 3.5 days to have its influence on us. So if this storm hits, let's say tomorrow, along the western United States coast, add 3, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a half. So you're talking about like Sunday, late Sunday perhaps, that the storm will actually arrive and pass by our neck of the woods here in the east.
Those of you who are watching, by the way, if you've got any questions, throw them up on the chat board, because I have the chat in front of me, so I can see your questions, and I will relay them to Joe, or if they're directed at me, or they're whichever way. Just put your questions on there, and we'll get some answers for you.
You know, Joe, compared to what's coming over the weekend, we're kind of like downplaying the system that's tomorrow night and early Friday, and yet, I mentioned it on air today, I don't know if you did, but today marks day 62. 62 consecutive days of really not so significant snowfall. We've had snow over the last 60 days in, let's say, the lower Hudson Valley, but it's snow that has hit the ground and melted, snow that has only accumulated on the grass or on trees or on car tops, really inconsequential snow. The last consequential snow, of course, was the storm on November the 15th, which caught a lot of people by surprise and caused havoc during the afternoon and evening commute home for many. We have not had anything remotely like that in 62 days.
Yep.
Now, tomorrow night and into early on Friday, we're forecasting, 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 inches.
Right.
Doesn't sound like a whole heck of a lot.
But it's something.
But it is something, and it's the most significant snow that many places have had in over 2 months.
Right, and we'll see how it's followed up with the weekend system. They're just showing the radar, tons of rain, and of course, as you mentioned, as that moisture hits the mountains, you can see there's kind of a wall there where the mountaintops are. So this is where it's all being translated over to snow. Meanwhile, by the way, as we go east, we're starting to see the beginnings of some snow breaking out over parts of Nebraska. Not nearly as impressive as the radar echoes we just looked at. The moisture, this first weather system is basically cut off from moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, so there's not going to be a whole lot to it when it moves across, and that's why I didn't see very much upside. And by the way, here in the Northeast, Joe, we got this cold front coming through. There's a dying area of snow showers up to the north and west of the coast through upstate New York. And they're moving southeast, where perhaps one stray one might survive into the Hudson Valley or northwest Jersey in the next couple hours, but that should be it.
Yeah, and the thing is that we should tell people, Joe, that today the temperatures got up, at least in the lower Hudson Valley, to within a few degrees of 40, but expect tomorrow, as an artifact of that frontal passage later tonight, the temperatures will probably be about at least 10 degrees colder, so it'll be more like 30 or within a few degrees of 30 as opposed to the somewhat milder readings today. And then ironically, it goes back up to near 40 again in the wake of the snowfall later in the day on Friday.
All right, so let's start off with the NAM model. And what we're looking at here is the upper air jet stream flow from at about 18,000 feet, or what it's called the 500 millibar level. And starting with I actually have it started at midnight, and it moves along. Now, if you noticed, folks, the bending there, where there's a slight bending in the Ohio Valley, that's the next shortwave trough, and there really isn't much to it. It's relatively weak. It doesn't really strengthen until it gets long by us. In fact, you still can't barely find it after it's gone. Now we're into Friday evening. And on the left-hand side, you can see the Pacific system now dropping into Texas and Oklahoma. At the same time, at the top of the picture is the northern jet. And this has been very interesting the last couple of weeks, Joe, the interaction with that northern part of the jet stream, the southern part of the jet stream. Sometimes it was recently, and with the Washington D.C. storm this weekend, we saw an instance where the northern jet was totally out of control, too strong, kept everything to the south.
Right.
And now this time it's relaxing enough where the southern system is going to impact areas further north. And in fact, the big question for the weekend system is how much of that northern jet really gets involved. I think that's been the primary battle with the weather models, because the more that northern jet gets involved, the further north, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The more that northern jet gets involved with that southern jet, where they do a bit of a phase, that's where you wind up taking a surface low north and west of the coast.
Right.
And as opposed to, which is the NAM's argument and the Europeans' argument, that, yeah, the northern jet does come down, but it never really quite phases completely with that southern stream, or at least it doesn't do it, where it's located here geographically, so that the surface low is going to try and perhaps take a track more south and east of the coastline, and that has big implications as far as snow accumulations are concerned, sleet, freezing rain, and for places that are all snow in terms of amounts.
Well, the last night's run was certainly colder than what we saw today. Last night, if you had looked at any of the model runs, especially the GFS and even the European model, they had more of a colder look to them, and especially with the GFS showing more in terms of snow and ice and sleet. Now today, the 12Z and especially the 18Z run, the intermediate run, which I really don't usually put much credence in, is suggesting that there'll be quite a bit more in terms of warm air advection, and that this is not necessarily going to be an all snow or even maybe a snow to ice event. It may be more of a snow, ice, and even plain rain event.
Again, depending on where you are.
Depending upon where you are. Now, the thing that I was chatting with Joe, and this is not a knock, believe me, this is not a knock on Levi Cohen and his Tropical Tidbits site, but I was just asking, I wonder what the algorithm is for the portrayal of precipitation type. Rain for green for rain and blue for snow, and the various colors of pink and for ice conditions, because Joe, we're looking at a situation on Sunday with some of the newer runs that shows flat out that it's going to be raining, not snowing or icing.
Well, that's off the GFS, and there are issues with the GFS because we have people speaking. People have mentioned the Capital Weather Gang, for instance, that there's some data issues right now with the GFS and with the GFS model, and because of the government shutdown, we don't know whether it's getting fixed or getting taken care of. The new upgrade, which is the parallel GFS, does that mean that the parallel has the same issues? That we don't know.
Right.
And I spoke to Bill Goodman about this. The GFS has had problems with the thermal profile of the atmosphere ever since the last upgrade was done, however many months or years ago it was.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
So that's been ongoing, and that is that is supposed to be addressed in the new upgrade. So it's a big I don't know when you look at these things and you think you're trying to figure out what's going to happen. But I would just make this one point with regards to this system. A lot of times people just sort of interchange terms with respect to you looking at maps and saying the low is further south, the models have shifted south, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That actually is not what is happening. Okay, what's happening here is that the actual temperature profile of the atmosphere is what is changing, and it's changing right now. The models, at least the NAM and the European in a big way, and the GFS and the Canadian in a lesser extent, are picking up on the fact that overall the atmosphere is colder in reality than what it was.
Right.
And what we're seeing is not that the low is necessarily, literally the L is instead of being in northern Kentucky, it's in southern Tennessee. Okay, all right, so the low technically is further south, but really what's happening is that the thermal profile, if the freezing line is going, say, my arm is like this, and it's actually more like this where it's colder up here, so you're going to track your surface flow along that thermal profile, all right? So it's not like it just suddenly, move this to here and move this to there. There's actually something going on in reality where that thermal ribbon is shaping up. Right. So, I guess I just want the folks that are really, really into weather, I've been trying to get them in my Patreon group to try to get them to look a little bit beyond what the actual map says and try to figure out what actually is happening in the atmosphere. So that's what's going on, folks. It's just basically a colder atmosphere, and models as each one has gone by seem to be adjusting, and that's going to have impact in the weather in the east. I'm going to bring the NAM back up from late this afternoon.
Well, we know that there's going to be, at least ahead of the system, again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, some good warm air advection. But that warm air advection may be, for the most part, concentrated in the upper and mid levels of the atmosphere. The question is, what's it going to be like down low, where you and I and so many of our viewers are, Joe, at the surface level? There may be a very shallow layer of near or below freezing temperatures, and that may lead to, and this may not be,
right.
some snow lovers are jumping up and down saying, this is it, we're finally going to do it. This may not be your
But
storm.
it depends, though. If you're in central and South Jersey, it might not be.
Right.
But maybe if you're in northern New Jersey, or if you're up in New York State, especially as you go up the Hudson Valley and in New England, this could be a big event for you. Let's come back to the first one, though, Joe, because
I was just going to say ice, more of a freezing rain or ice for not everybody, for some, not
right.
all, and that could be a very dangerous situation if a whole heck of ice accretion does take place. Let's say late Sunday night into late Saturday night into part of Sunday. Personally, if I had my druthers and I had to make a choice, I'd choose snow over the ice. But we may be looking at an icy situation for some of our viewers come Sunday.
All right, so I've got the NAM up, and hang on one second. Trying to get, there we go, come on. Trying to get that chat board up, and I seem to have lost it. But I'm going to run the NAM here, and here's that first system coming out, moving across Missouri and in through southern Illinois. And you see this expanding area of snow that develops into Ohio and Pennsylvania. And it's not the biggest snow area in the world, obviously, into northern Virginia. Now, this is tomorrow night at around midnight. You're beginning to see that snow approach the New York area. The NAM has been colder. The NAM has been colder with this, making it more snow even for Long Island. Then it goes by. It's just really quick. We're talking about, from a standpoint of total moisture, Joe, not very much. Right. A couple of tenths, or even in some cases, maybe even less than a tenth of an inch. So this is not going to really knock anybody's socks off, and it shouldn't be overly problematic when it comes to dealing with it. It's probably going to wind up being a nuisance for the morning commute on Friday. But then it gets out of the way.
Now here's the irony also. I have a son. He's into his 6th year of teaching high school physics, and he's got midterms coming up, and he's concerned about Friday as one of those examination days. And so he asked me just a few days ago, and I said, well, it doesn't look all that big. I said, the worst case scenario, I would say, would be a delay. I don't think this is going to be enough to close schools. But then all of a sudden, of late, I said, well, wait a minute. We have a 3-day holiday weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And what's to stop, let's say, maybe a few school superintendents look out the window, see it snow, see a bit of snow on the ground, say, hey, we haven't gone through any snow days yet, and actually close the school as opposed to... And actually, instead of just delaying the opening, but
here's the precip now for the second system.
Ooh.
And this is only taking us through 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday.
You see all the white over Tennessee. That's where the lion's share is, at least through 84 hours on this particular map.
Let me address a point though that's on the chat. Andrew with Thyberg speaking to. Daniello, who's one of our regulars, they're kind of talking about the snow maps, and lost it. Oh, here, Andrew says, talking about the GFS lowering snow amounts and because of mixing, and that the snow depicted on snow maps isn't accurate. That brings up something that I think is really important. You shouldn't look. Those snow maps are just literal interpretations of how much precip is falling down. If they're based on a 10-to-1 ratio, they really shouldn't be used as a forecast tool. In other words, you shouldn't look at a snow map that's got a 10 printed over a spot and forecast 10 inches for that spot.
Right.
That's not what they're there for. They're just basically giving you a picture of the liquid precipitation that it's calculating, putting in that 10-to-1 ratio, maybe doing a few other little tweaks there, and it's coming up with a number that you should be, you'll be able to do, like we used to do that without having the precip maps.
Right.
We used to just basically eyeball it and guess. But with this, it looks like there's going to be a front-end thump of snow, I think.
A thump.
Yes. We had an example of a front-end thump, for example, if in the Northeast was the November 15th system. But you see that area of expanding snow and also some sleet in there in northwestern Virginia, those darker blues, that's heavy snow, and then it shifts eastward by 1 o'clock in the morning, which is here's 1 o'clock in the morning, as far as the dam goes out from the last run.
Look at that narrow stripe of purple or pink?
Right, that's probably sleet, and it might be a bit underdone, and then you've got the rain to the south. The surface low here is sitting on the South Carolina, North Carolina border. The literal L is further south from prior runs. But if you look where the isobars are pointed, Joe, they're kind of pointed northeast to just south of the south shore of Long Island toward Cape Cod.
Right.
So that's that boundary, or at least that's where the model seems to be wanting to set the boundary up,
right,
to drive the low. But there are some models on the ensembles and a few others that have that frontal boundary tilted ever so slightly further south,
right,
and some maybe even a bit further to the north. So where that boundary sets up, where that it kind of looks like your index finger pointing out, where that sets up is ultimately going to be key, because just north and west of that is the rain snow line, and just north and west of that is where you're going to see a ton of snow.
And again, we're how many days out now? Is it Wednesday?
60 some odd.
It's melding all into my head here. Yeah, you're right. As we get closer, and hopefully after tomorrow, once the main storm makes its way onshore, we'll be able to get a much better handle as to who's going to get what in terms of precipitation type.
Jason Schaefer asked this question: would we make any comparisons with this to the November 15th storm in terms of synoptics? The thing that comes to mind, and this is going to be a critical point on this, Jason, is one of the big differences that I'm noticing is in that November system, we had the high that was up in east. If you remember, there was a little high that was up in eastern New England that kind of held on for an extra couple of hours. That produced just enough cold air. I think there's, this time around you've got a bigger high, a lot more cold air up to the north. And that I think is part of the forecast problem, because this sometimes can be an instance where the cold air in New England drains southward in a bigger way during the day Saturday, and you're seeing all this warm air trying to come up, and it fights it, and it takes a long time for it to chew through. And I think that's a consideration with this when we get there on Saturday, to see how cold are the low levels, and whether for somebody there's going to be a real battle going on between the cold air to the north and the warm air trying to erode it, and that's where you're going to wind up with you could wind up with some big numbers.
Now, if I remember correctly, the November 15th storm was being promoted as snow, changing to sleet, ice, and eventually changing over to plain rain. And I know a lot of people were saying that they were waiting for the changeover, and as you pointed out, it was delayed by a few hours at least. The other thing I remember is that the parameters that we normally use to forecast snow versus sleet or ice, we use something called a 540 baroclinic ribbon, which indicates the temperature for rain versus snow. Anything above 540 generally changes over. If it's a 546, for example, we think that it's more of a rain event as opposed to a snow event. But in November, I said, this is crazy. It's snowing at like thicknesses of 546, 548. This isn't supposed to happen. Typically this doesn't happen. So when you look, Joe, at what we're looking at now for Saturday night and Sunday, you see that 540 line way up toward Albany, and you say, oh, okay, it's going to be rain, mostly rain for us. But I wonder if what would happen in November is going to happen again, where the actual boundary zone between ice and sleet and rain and snow will be more like 546 or 548.
Well, that day, what was it? It was 550 that day.
It was, and I said, this is not what we learned in college. This is not in the synoptic meteorology textbook. You don't get snow when it's 550 thickness or whatever, but we did back in November. So now I'm a little leery in this upcoming event, seeing the 540 line so far north and just arbitrarily saying, oh, it's going to be rain. It doesn't look like that. It'll be cold enough at the surface for ice or snow.
And I would be very careful with the GFS in particular, because the GFS on that November 15th storm, if I remember correctly, had rain, well up into the Hudson Valley.
Right.
So it again reflecting the fact that it's got this problem.
If the GFS were a person and it was taking a test or an exam, I don't know, if you and I were the teachers, I don't know about you, but with me, if I would, after that November storm, I would write off to the top of the test, see me,
right,
in red.
So here's the dilemma in the upper air. I mean, we're talking about phasing. What we mean by that is that you get a system that's in the northern part of the jet stream, and if you look at that band on the top of the picture, folks, that yellowish band at the top of the picture, that is part of the northern jet stream. The southern part of the jet stream is that almost V shape that runs from Illinois down into Texas. You see those red streaks there, those jet streaks, running up with strong southwest winds from East Texas on up into southern Missouri. It's when the two streams try to get together. And if you watch on the loop here, you can see the northern stream is coming around. And then on the NAM, there's still the two distinct separate entities.
Right.
They keep things unfazed, and the reason why that's important is that if they stay unfazed with that northern jet, a separate entity, and as far south as it is, that is another checkbox in the column of a colder atmosphere here.
Right.
You'll wind up with a more suppressed system. And remember, this winter and most of the time, and I've always said using the phrase "the trend is your friend," suppressed systems has been the dominant feature for the last couple of months. So when models try to show you that something's phased in an environment where systems are not phasing, you have to question it. You have to wonder whether it's wrong. Now here's the GFS today for the same time frame. Now there are some differences in terms of the structure of the trough and the position of it, but when you look at the GFS, the issue beyond 84 hours is that it starts to kind of phase them in. The phase happens a little bit further east than what it was showing the last couple of days, so the model is still colder from a few days ago, but the bottom line is that if this southern part of this jet remains identifiable and doesn't completely phase with that northern part, you're going to wind up with a colder atmosphere, and that's the big dilemma here in my view. And then it moves out, and the other thing is, Joe, we have to point out, we're talking really cold afterward, because there's going to be some bitter cold air that is coming down. And wind. I mean, look at those isobars here with the straight north wind coming down from northeastern Canada.
Right.
This is typically how we see some of the coldest temperatures we get around here.
This is it. If you're wondering when we get very cold around here, this is the pattern. I can only imagine, Joe, if we had a deep snow cover to go along with that, then we'd really see temperatures drop, and we'd really see temperatures drop again this would be for, I'm looking here, so this is overnight, the overnight hours of Sunday night.
Right.
Monday night, the winds will be a lot calmer, well, not considerably calmer, but
That's Tuesday morning.
that's Tuesday morning. Now again, if we have a goodly amount of snow cover, you'll see some temperatures really fall rapidly on Monday night.
Whatever point I just hit at 41.5 and 74.0, it has a temperature of 5 above. Now, the European, by the way, which we can't show you other than what's available for publicly, but we will do that. I just want to, the European today has a colder look to it. I guess for lack of a better phrase to describe it. And as we put the surface map on here, and let me just back it up. This is Tuesday, but Joe, the European swings that low pretty far south, down almost to the Louisiana border. You see the high that's kind of enveloped around here. And
right.
Going back to Jason's question with respect to the November system, I think the cold air here, there's more of it. And then the lows in southern Virginia. There's that index finger pointed off the coast of southern New Jersey, off the south shore of Long Island toward Cape Cod. Now, we don't see the in-between because Monday morning, the low is on the western part of Nova Scotia. So you could, if you want, you could probably draw a straight line from the prior low to the Nova Scotia position, and the surface low tracks just south of the south shore of Long Island, just south of Cape Cod. But I will say I was able to look at the in-betweens, and the surface low actually kind of slides east first, and the European has it off the Delaware coast by a fair distance, and south of Montauk or Nantucket, and then runs it up to the northeast. And that's an important distinction because that will prolong precip along the coast. It will so then there will be a changeover back to freezing and frozen precipitation as the cold air comes rushing in on the backside.
And a lot of moisture that might be on the roadways or on your driveway, depending upon how you're looking at things. Sunday afternoon and evening, very quick drop in temperature, and you may find that come Monday morning you may want to get on the phone and call Madison Square Garden and invite the Rangers perhaps to hold practice either in front of your house or on your driveway, because that moisture is going to freeze up, and as a result we may find a lot of icy patches to deal with come Monday morning. Worse situation than, let's say, if you had 6 or 8 inches of snow on the ground. At least you can get rid of that with a plow, but an ice situation. And I'm also thinking, Joe, about many of the trees getting coated with ice and power lines as well. So again, if we're looking in some places plus wind, so we could be looking at a rather serious situation coming up for later on this weekend if it turns out to be more ice than anything else.
Here's the Europeans' view. This is Monday morning when you've got this wrapped up upper low in western New York, but by that time the surface low is already long gone, clearly. But the European, again, the southern stream it remains its own entity into Sunday morning, and that's important. The model runs going back we'll go back to yesterday's, for example. Much more of a phased look here yesterday, and therefore, you wound up with a warmer track. I'll go back to Monday. I mean, here, same thing, further west. But when we look at it today, there's it's the southern part is kind of pulled down a bit more to the south. It's a little weaker, which is, if you're a snow lover, that's what you want. You don't want something too amplified, too far to the west. Otherwise, you're going to warm up and rain.
Well, I've been doing, I was taking a look at what we call the ensemble forecasts and balancing them out between what the GFS was and what the European was. There was a time a couple of days ago, Joe, where that, again, based upon a mean of the two ensembles, that the storm would literally track directly over the tri-state area. Now, at least as of this afternoon, the ensemble runs are suggesting the storm will track not over us, but just a little ways to the south and east of our area, which again is a colder solution and would maintain ice and snow for a longer period of time in places that are getting that. And a storm comes very close to you. If you're along the coastline, it may turn out to be a period of just plain rain. But even then, once the storm system moves on by, and the winds turn around to the north, we're going to see a very sharp drop in temperature and also change back to freezing or frozen precipitation probably later in the day on Sunday.
Just addressing, David asked about Weather US, which is a great website, and they do have weather.us. If you want to actually go see the in-between maps with the precip, you can go there. I think they have them on there, but you can't share them. I actually had permission, and I seldom did use them, but
You're talking about with the European?
yeah, with the European, but I did ask and was told that you can't share. But speaking of not being able to share, Joe, here's a question for you. The 18Z European, which not everybody gets to see, but we can kind of look at it. Is it out far enough now, the ensembles, at 7:45?
Yeah, well, the operational run goes to 90 hours, and the ensemble goes to 144.
All right, so why don't we do this? We'll pull this up full screen, and I'm going to look at this off camera and see if they're there. That might give us a little bit of clue of some kind as far as what's going to happen going forward.
Right.
While I'm doing that, if you're in the east, anywhere from say Northern Virginia on up into upstate New York and into New England, how do you think, in terms of the big snows, where do you think the big snows are going to set up?
Oh, my goodness. Well, certainly the Poconos and the Catskills, northwestern corner of Connecticut, on up toward the Berkshires. Notice, if you will, I'm pointing out places that are elevated above more than a few thousand feet, and even down into the Virginias, West Virginia, and also into portions of northern Virginia, and western sections of Maryland. Garrett County, for example, is an elevated area in western Maryland. They could pick up some substantial snowfall as well. I don't think the big cities are going to get it, though. Now, is this now the... is this what we're looking at right now?
This is the 18Z.
That looks a tad warmer than what they had.
Well, it's hard to tell, Joe. The maps. It depends on
It's-
all these different sites where you look at these graphical maps, and they all come out kind of differently.
Is this operational, what we're looking at?
I think that's the operational.
Okay, so what do we...
Well, go to. Well, this is
let's go to... they don't on the 18Z. They don't give a. They don't provide northeast.
No, so I had to pull up the whole U.S.
Oh well. I'm
So
sorry.
hit loop or hit single. And this way we'll just slide it. We'll just have to eyeball it. I don't know, Joe. It looks kind of the same to me. Surface low is in southeastern Virginia. That same finger pointing in about the same spot.
Right.
We don't have a lot of. I haven't. It's only very recently that I even started looking at this stuff with the 18Z. So I don't know. How good is it? I don't know.
Is the anything with the ensemble? Or is that
No, the ensemble's not out yet.
All right. Well.
The one thing I did notice also, Joe, with respect to the very cold air coming in, and then this is something that hasn't really been mentioned too much, and regardless of what happens weather-wise, be it rain, sleet, snow, or any combination thereof, it is going to be very cold. It's going to be bitter cold Sunday night and Monday. The European numbers are actually almost 10 degrees colder than the GFS numbers. You pull the GFS numbers for Monday morning in and around New York City on the last couple of runs. Last night's run, it had some cold numbers, but they have the temperature sitting down at around 10 or 11. Inland areas in the single digits to near zero. The European, in some places, is almost 10 degrees colder, which would say temperatures close to zero in New York City and below zero on up to the northwest, north, and northeast. I mean, that really is. And then you start talking pulling numbers if you go upstate of, minus 10, minus 15, minus 20. I don't know how realistic it is, but the bottom line is the backside of this is going to get very, very cold.
The alignment of the surface winds and the upper air winds out of the north and northwest doesn't really happen though until what first thing Monday morning.
Yeah.
So what we may see, Joe, is a slow but steady decline over the course of the night on Sunday, and all of a sudden we'll just reach a point on Monday where the temperatures reach a certain level, like 6 or 8, and that's it. It just holds
And
there.
it just holds. A lot's going to depend. Is there snow cover on the ground? The actual direction of the wind, is it northwest? Is it northwest? Is it north? Because that makes a huge difference. We could take a look. Let's take a look quickly at the long range. We still pretty much, now that we've broken the back of the pattern that was here in early January. Hang on a second, Johnny Quest. Is that what they're invest in Southwest? They're doing an invest in southwest of Mexico. I didn't even know. Are they really?
What, we have a tropical system?
You know what? Hang on. Well, we'll come back to that, Johnny. And by the way, I posted the link up here on the chat. You were asking about that, the actual snowfall map that I showed earlier. I put the link up on there. But if you missed it, just message me and I'll send it to you. Okay, so here's the European. And Joe, one of the things we notice here is the strengthening of that Pacific ridge up in the northeast Pacific, and the deepening of the trough in the eastern half of the United States. That is a very cold flow that is setting up from the Arctic regions straight south. You and I have both said at some point in the next couple of weeks, aside from the cold air we're seeing here in the east, but there's going to be a pretty sizable Arctic dump coming down in some stage. And I'm going to just go to the GFS so we can go out a little longer. And the GFS is very consistent with the European. And running through the next couple of weeks, I mean, this is just really kind of, that's pretty crazy if that winds up happening.
That is. That's just in time for Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Well, it is February 1st. All right, let me just see what, let's take a look at what Johnny Quest was mentioning. I'm just going to go to the Hurricane Center. We'll pull up the East Pacific. All right, they got no systems listed here. Aircraft reconnaissance, plan of the day. I don't see it here. It says negative and negative. I didn't, you normally wouldn't look at it for a tropical system in January, except a couple of weeks ago they actually had that system that they were talking about in the East Pacific that never wound up doing anything. So I'm not seeing it. So maybe you could send me something on that with regards to it, or unless he was referring also on tropical tidbits, so we can go in here. Usually when no. O1W. Where is that? Well, that's way out. I mean, that's out in the West Pacific.
We're talking about the Philippines.
Yeah,
that's the Philippines.
Yeah, I did actually see. I actually did see when I was looking at a lot of the upper air out in the Pacific, trying to figure out when that Pacific jet was going to collapse. The GFS and the European were both spinning up some kind of tropical storm or hurricane out that way. And by the way, that does happen on occasionally. And if you go back to the winter of 2014, 2015, one of the things that kind of set it off in terms of the big pattern change that happened right around the same time this one is, and eventually led to the infamous half blizzard, and then it was bitter cold through the end of March after that. But there was a typhoon, a strong typhoon, I forget the name, that wound up recurving and moving north and northeastward through the Pacific, and eventually got absorbed into a big low over the Aleutians, which set the whole ball rolling in terms of the big ridge building in the west and the negative East Pacific oscillation, and then all the cold air dumping down into the east. So it does happen that occasionally you do get these tropical systems that get involved in the whole process of what's happening with our own weather pattern. And I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions here. Scott Briller brings up the fact that this week is the anniversary of the January 19th, 20th, 1978 snowstorm in New York City.
Well, that's
13.6 inches. And it was the first double-digit snowfall since the Lindsay snowstorm in '69.
This is the 41st
that was an 8-year drought.
The 41st
41st anniversary.
And that the incredible thing about that, not so much all the snow that we had in New York City, that system broke Boston's all-time snow record, which had stood for something like 100 years, some ridiculous figure like that. And meanwhile, just 18 days later, another storm came along, the blizzard of '78, February 6th and 7th, 1978, which not only dumped more snow on us than it did with this storm that was just mentioned, but it also broke Boston's snow record, which was only up for 18 days from the storm of the 20th and 21st of January 1978.
Matt S. asks, for several days the GFS was showing freezing temperatures, making it all the way to central Florida on January 21st. However, it is now switched to a much warmer one with barely freezing in North Florida. What do you think? Well, Matt, it's going to depend on, when you see the models handling the vortex dropping southward out of Canada. Sometimes it drops it way too far south, and I know what you're speaking of. And then on the very next run, it doesn't quite drop as far south, or perhaps it drops further south, but it does it further west. You're not going to, the thing is, you can't really look that far ahead and expect, any kind of, well, now we're not that far ahead. We're talking about the 21st, but models are continuing to adjust. And I also think that there's the volatility of the pattern of the global models with the splitting of the polar vortex. It seems like the global models are having a really difficult time handling certain things. And anytime you get a pattern like this, Joe, we saw this last year in March. Whenever you get these extremes in terms of very, very strong highs, very, very deep troughs, and you get, if you could measure them by the teleconnections, you wind up with these sort of extreme off-the-wall numbers. It seems like the models just can't handle it. They don't know how to react to something that's not inside the normal, flow of things. And when it goes outside of that, they just kind of go, whoa, what are you doing to me? And it takes time for them to kind of adjust to these unusual changes that maybe only happen every couple of years or every 10 years, whatever it is. But when you stretch the atmosphere to extremes, I think it has a big impact on the global models. It might have less of an impact, though, on the non-global models, and maybe that's the reason why the non-global models had that colder look to things. The NAM certainly did last night, and
more of a regional model.
Right, and now the global models are sensing that and playing catch up. That could be the case. I'm just openly speculating. I don't have any way of proving that, but it certainly sounds good.
Well, to quote a line from Isaac Asimov in his story, The Last Question, when the computers were saying, there is as of yet insufficient data for a meaningful answer. And this may be the case here. Or as the robot on Lost in Space used to say a lot to Dr. Smith,
it does not
that does not compute.
All right, so let's switch gears here and talk about Sunday, the lunar eclipse. And the lunar eclipse, Joe, for those of you who are interested in astronomy, he's the guy. He's the big cheese. And on my YouTube channel, on the video library, Joe gave a talk back a week ago at Pace University. We have that, and it's posted in the video library. So after we're done, and if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, I'll reshare it in the community, so should get a notification about where it is.
Well, everybody's talking about the eclipse and thinking about it, and such as
Corey Bodziak specifically. Do you think we'll be able to see the lunar eclipse Sunday night?
I think, and if you have any of your own opinion, Joe, I think we're going to go through the worst of this weekend system probably in the first half of the day Sunday. The storm track has it moving away from the New York metropolitan area late Sunday and Sunday evening. Now, the eclipse does not begin until 10:33 Sunday night. So what I'm hoping is that enough of the moisture field will have been dragged away to the north and east and allow for some good openings in the clouds and allow us to see the moon and the eclipse. The only problem is, if you're going to go out to watch this, and doesn't happen very often, a total eclipse of the moon, my one advice would be make sure you bundle up, because it is going to be absolutely frigid. And it's also going to be high in the sky. This is going to be the highest, something like 70 degrees above the horizon. Your clenched fist held at arm's length is equivalent to 10 degrees. So we're talking about something that if you put your fist on the horizon, you go 7 fists up, that's how high the moon is going to be in the sky, which means that if you say to yourself, oh, I don't have to go outside to look at it, I'll look out the window. Unless you can somehow manage to put your face up against the window and go like that, you're going to have a problem staying warm. You're going to have to head out, bundle up, and I do think we will have a shot, a fighting chance. I think if the storm, for example, Joe, were coming, let's say, 6 or 8 hours later, I think then we would be pretty well, it'd be a foregone conclusion that we probably would be skunked and not have a chance. But I think right now, the way the schedule is working out, the storm is going to begin to bid a fond-adieu, good riddance to bad rubbish, at least in terms of the precipitation, at the end of the day Sunday, and allowing for some improvement Sunday night to break the clouds up and allow for some views of the moon for the eclipse.
Here's just a couple of quick things I want to address. So 5,000 subscribers with no videos, as he calls himself. Do you think the snowfall will have a sharp southern cutoff? The answer is yes. It will sharply cut off. You're going to go from rain to a coating to an inch to 3 inches to 6 inches over a relatively short distance. And not sure exactly where that's going to set up. If you believe the European, it sets up from somewhere along the north coast of New Jersey, Monmouth County, so basically from just south of Sandy Hook to just south of Philadelphia to just south of Wilmington to just to the east of Washington and Baltimore. David Erickson says local meteorologists in Boston are showing weather maps over 1 inch of freezing rain between the Berkshires and 95, and is that, too soon? Well, at this point being Wednesday, I would say, I would say that falls into the land of open speculation. I haven't looked. I haven't looked to see specifically what the impact is.
I think the deep thunder model was suggesting something like that. And let me tell you, you talk about a quarter of an inch being devastating. You were talking about here about 1 inch of ice. I mean, I don't remember. There have been very few in my lifetime, I think, that have produced that much ice.
Yeah, that's
kind of like
rare.
That's kind of like pushing it.
Nitrovert, any chance watches or warnings for southeast Minnesota? From what I'm looking at, the northern edge of the snow passes just to your south, makes it to about the northern border of Iowa, and doesn't make it further north than that. Jason Harden in his forever search for snow in Alabama. Got to get that vortex to drop down far enough south. I didn't really. One of the good things I like about having a couple of one storm or two storms front and center like we do right now is that, one, it actually allows us to not pay attention as much to the second one as to the first one, even though tonight we've been paying more attention to the second one. But up until now, we haven't, whereas everybody else has been paying, all the chatter's been about the second one and not about the first one, right. which I think is just wrong. You got to take them one at a time. Go ahead.
Or you wake up, you see the snow, and you have to take care of it on Friday morning, and then you turn on your radio or you turn on your TV set, and you say, if you think this was something, you ain't seen nothing yet. And we'll have the complete story.
Yeah, it's all about teases and all the rest of it and how it's written. And as far as the long range in terms of specific, when I've got the way I operate is when I've got something front and center, I don't have time to look except to give it a cursory glance. I really don't have the time to look out to the long range, because everything that we've been looking at in the long range, waiting to get into the short range, hasn't come. Now you finally got it. So I'm not going to spend the time looking for other ones when I've got the one in front of me, front and center.
People are not satisfied. I mean, this first system's not even here yet. You're looking at the second system, and we've had people that are already pinging Joe here saying, well, what's going to happen after the second system?
Right.
I mean, come on now. This is,
David and Chloe.
These are the same people who declared winter dead just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, that's true. David and Chloe wait a minute. Anzushevsky. I hope I'm close. She wants heavy snow in Baltimore. You just had heavy snow in Baltimore. And they're getting greedy now. Bertha Gunter, who's a regular here, and she's from North Carolina, will the solar eclipse... Oh, it's a lunar eclipse, Bertha. The lunar eclipse will be at the same time here in Western North Carolina as it is up. Are they going to be able to see it there?
In the Eastern. If you're in the Eastern time zone, it's 10:33 for the start. I believe the total phase, generally speaking, the total phase is going to run from about 11:30 to 12:30 a.m. with the peak, or the mid-eclipse at around midnight. And then it's all over by about 1:50 a.m. And I don't know about you, but as enthusiastic as I am, 1:50 a.m., I will be watching probably the Inside the Eyelid show.
Yeah. Peter Bicker, what site has the 18Z Euro? None of them do. Joe and I were using, let's call it the secret site and just leave it there.
Yes.
Just running through the rest of this, just seeing if there's any other additional questions.
Can we please have a miracle? Ethan Kerr wants to know, can we have a miracle and get snow in Ocean County? Only 1 inch of snow so far this winter.
Well,
I mean, Ethan, as I just said, even up in the tri-state New York area, we've gone 62 days consecutively. Tomorrow will be 63 until the first flakes begin falling late tomorrow night of a non-snow period or very little snow. We had that storm in mid-November. But I think this, if we don't get anything out of this tomorrow night, if you don't get anything out of this tomorrow night, you might, hope for Saturday night and Sunday.
Mahogany 2680, does the moon/eclipse affect the weekend storm in any way?
Well, the alignment, what we call a syzygy, astronomically higher than normal tides. That's something to bring up, Joe. The tides are really going to be rocking and rolling this weekend, higher than normal because of the alignment of Sun, Earth, and Moon. So we could be seeing coastal flood advisories posted for that situation, especially for Saturday night and on into Sunday as well.
All right, Stu Drums, Central Connecticut with the second system. Tough call. If you're like right around along Route 84, sometimes that's a good demarcation line between rain and snow. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to play out, but I think you're going to get a fair amount, on the front end, and maybe even a decent amount on the back end. So it's a question of what happens in between. There was one other, let's see, where was it? I always wind up losing the questions.
I'm seeing questions here. I don't know if you...
From Muchacho, who asks, do you think the Arctic air crashing the storm in northeastern PA could see great snow ratios greater than 10-1? On the backside, maybe, but assuming there's a changeover on the backside, depending on how this thing tracks.
I'll tell you, tomorrow night, initially, temperatures in some places are going to be in the upper teens and low 20s. I think that's good for 12 or maybe 14-1 snow ratio, a little bit of a puffier snow. And as the night wears on, temperatures may actually start to slowly rise toward daybreak, bringing it back to more of a 10-1 type situation. So,
Wonky Cascade, can it snow in Maryland? You folks in Maryland are getting greedy now. You just had a sizable snowfall. And since the overall pattern, by the way, has been favoring these southern tracks, eventually I wouldn't be surprised to see another one go by. So if it's not this one or the next one, maybe it's the one after that.
Now, Ethan Kerr brings up a very good point about a better chance of snow or thunderstorms for Ocean County. I haven't thought about the possibility of, let's say, thunder snow. If we do get thunder snow...
Well, I wonder whether he's talking about... Well, it could be on both ends, depending on, how things set up.
Well, talking about Saturday night, Sunday, if we do get any kind of thunder and lightning, it would probably be of low-top convection. And I haven't looked at the Omega field. What
if the frontal boundary were more north of Ocean County? What about just a plain old thunderstorm with temperatures up in the 50s or near 60?
Right, they'd be in the warm wedge, wouldn't they?
So I mean, that's going to depend on where that frontal boundary sets up. Let's see. Just trying to get one last question here because you and I are going to have to go soon.
We've only been going for an hour and 5 minutes.
That's all?
Yeah.
With no commercial interruption.
1 hour and 4 minutes and 49 seconds. So it's been a while. Thunder snow, me like, says Mark G. Well, there was thunder, snow, and sleet in Jerusalem today, says Izzy D. I didn't hear about that.
Say that again?
Izzy D says there were thunder, snow, and sleet in Jerusalem today.
Yes, I actually did see I saw a news story back, was it yesterday, about the fact that Jerusalem they were preparing for the arrival of some big snows there, or some snow. And we noted when we were looking at the map of Europe and the Middle East, there was another deep trough and a deep upper low that was dropping into the eastern part of the Mediterranean and toward Israel, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, that whole area. So I had mentioned that it might snow in Israel and in Jerusalem, and then I see this article. All right, folks, we're going to have to wrap it up. Thanks very much for being here tonight, and Joe and I will be back again tomorrow night and Friday night. Are we going to do a Facebook show tonight?
I don't know. We certainly have gone long enough here with this, and
well, maybe we'll do if we do, we'll do a short Facebook show tonight.
For the purpose mainly of the fact that the new
the new NAM will be out, so we can get some clues.
See how long ago I go by?
Yes.
I was about to say the new NGM will be
out.
I
know. I was just I caught that. Okay, yeah. So we'll do a Facebook show tonight, the Joe and Joe Show, and we'll live stream the new NAM. So bring your popcorn and your chair and just sit down and watch, and we'll see where the NAM takes us as we head into the next model cycle. Because after all, everybody and all the snow weenies just live and die by the next with the next model cycle. And as soon as the next model cycle is over, they're already talking about the next model cycle.
Or as we have often said, well, let's wait till the next run.
That's right. All right, folks. So we'll see you maybe later on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on Facebook at roughly 9:20 or 9:25, and you and I will be back tomorrow at the same time, about 7:05 Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel. So have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.